So Winston Peters says Cabinet never agreed to stop at the end of the Pike River drift. So have you broken a promise?
No, let's go back a step. Before the 2017 election, all parties were called upon by the families to sign a pledge. That was a pledge to recover the drift. It was very clear. New Zealand First did not sign that pledge. And then we formed government, and Cabinet mandated that the Pike River Agency would be set up to recover the drift. That is very clear in the papers. I might add this too about Winston Peters. In the 3 years that I was in government with him, I invited him many, many times to go down to the Pike River project, the recovery project. He had at one point said he wanted to lead the way into
That's right.
He never went down. In all the 3 years in government, he never went down. So it's great that Winston's now interested in the project, but before the 2017 election, he wasn't, because they wouldn't sign the pledge, and he wasn't in the 3 years we were in government.
So are you saying that he's just making this up?
Well, I don't know whether he's trying to rewrite the Cabinet minutes, but the Cabinet minutes are very clear. The pledge that the Labour Party and the Green Party, and for that matter United Future, signed up to was a commitment to recover the drift, and that's what we've done.
OK, but Peter says that you haven't done a good enough job. You pushed to be the Minister for the Pike River, and that, you know, you've sort of lost sight of what matters here, and that is finding the truth.
I was asked to be the Minister for Pike River Recovery. I was happy to pick up that role. I did that job and followed the Cabinet mandates to do so, and it was on the back of the pledge that some political parties signed up to, which was to recover the drift. OK,
but why did you rule out going any further before they'd only got a quarter of the way down the drift, and you sort of ruled out going any further? Yeah, so I had to go. I had to go to Cabinet 3 times for the budget for the Pike River Recovery Agency, because the cost of the project was getting more and more expensive. The more we did, the more we discovered how challenging the project was, and we got to 2020, and I needed another top-up, taking it to $51 million. Cabinet was very clear. And of course, Winston Peters was part of that Cabinet. It was very clear we have now exhausted our willingness to fund any further activity, right. And therefore, to the extent there was ever an option to go beyond recovery of the drift, that was closed off. OK, but if money wasn't an object, would you keep going? The critical factor was safety. And getting through the roof fall and getting into the mine workings. It was clear, experts were saying, even before we formed government in 2017, that getting back into the mine workings was all but impossible. We could do it for hundreds of millions of dollars, right. But actually doing it safely... Because this is what the families are saying. They're saying it is feasible, right? Well, they got a report that, interesting, nobody has put their name to, that says that it's feasible. They've put a cost to it. That's been reviewed by experts. It has a much higher cost. But the reality is, you do get to a point where, having fulfilled what we were asked by the families to do to recover the... So the line has been drawn. We're just going to leave it there. Much more we can do. The line has been drawn. That is it? Except that there is still a police investigation ongoing. Yeah. They are still doing further work, drilling further boreholes, putting a scanner down to look at the certain aspects of it. So that work will continue for the next few months, but then that is pretty much it. So if the police is carrying on with their investigation, it's not going to be sealed imminently, so the family's going to get its wish? Well, the process of sealing the mine is underway. And bearing in mind that there was a permanent seal put on the mine before, we had to break through that. There are other mines that have been technically permanently sealed. But so the police still have access? But the reality is, in the end, this is all about, and the families were very clear too, in the end, this is all about safety. At least the work is about safety. Obviously, it is about continuing the investigation, getting better information, giving the police a better chance to get good evidence to consider whether or not they can take a prosecution. That's what the objective always was. That's the way we have approached this, and we've fulfilled our obligation in doing so. OK, well, let's move on to the health ministry and the health reforms. You're a high-performing minister. You expect a lot. Are you currently feeling let down by your own ministry? No, I'm not. I think we're all struggling with the huge challenge that we've got. There were challenges in the health sector before we took government from the last 3 years. We then were hit with COVID. And COVID, I think, has compounded issues that were in the sector before. They've just become a lot more intensified. But you are on record saying it's hard to get information out of the ministry. You say you're on record but saying that you're frustrated by the pace of reforms. Actually, what I've said is that I think the ministry struggles to get the information from the sector as
as a whole in terms of providing information to me. I work very closely and very well with the Director General and indeed with senior officials of the ministry. They do a good job. I think the challenge we've got and the reason why we're doing the reforms is the ministry is being asked to do a lot of things. Yeah. Oversee and performance manage the system as well as providing the high-level policy advice. And I think what we think is that actually having a ministry focused on the long-term, the policy advice, the public health advice, and having a separate entity to really manage performance of the system, that is a better setup.
Well, you just mentioned the Director General, Ashley Bloomfield. So he has admitted today misleading the Health Select Committee and is having to correct the record. And this is over, and I'll just give the context. He was asked whether he had ever spoken to MFAT officials over the United Nations worker that was medevaced here because of COVID, being contracted with COVID. He said he hadn't, and then now he says he did have a text exchange. Is that good enough? Does that shake your confidence in him?
Look, I don't know enough about that particular incident. I know that was very fast-moving at the time. I was certainly briefed on it after everything had happened. Ashley is dealing with a lot of issues all the time. I have immense respect for him. I think he's doing a terrific job in a ministry that is being pulled all over the place to do a whole heap of things. Yep. And I just think if we're going to get the best performance for the system and for the ministry, that's what justifies.
Will you be speaking to him about this? I mean, is this something that is
look, I'm meeting with Ashley several times a week. I meet with him on a Monday. I will take the situation.
Okay,
That's the first time I've heard of that.
Okay, so this week, as part of the health reforms, we've just scrapped the health targets that measure performance and replaced them with health indicators. They're not pass or fail marks. So I guess the question is, how are we going to know if the system's getting better or worse?
First of all, the hospitals will still have targets they have to meet, so in terms of wait times and EDs and all the rest of it. That stuff won't go away. But in terms of public-facing indication of whether or not the system is doing what we expect it to do, these indicators will give us that. They are indicators. They are, to some extent, symbolic, that if something is not working in one of the indicators we're talking about, it tells us there are other problems throughout the rest of the system. Right.
OK, but I guess so the DHBs or the hospitals are still going to have targets. So what's wrong with just having those instead of having these indicators? I mean,
we don't want targets to become an end in themselves, as I think they became. I think under the previous government they set these targets. So one was the number of procedures carried out. What that drove DHBs to do was do a whole lot of minor little procedures, many of which could actually be done out of a hospital in a primary care setting, rather than focusing on what the hospital should be doing, which is the big complex.
But from a political point of view, are you just afraid of setting targets because, other targets have not been met by the government, like Kiwi Build, suicide reduction targets?
If you look at one of the targets, it is about access by young people to acute mental health services, which we have a major challenge with at the moment. Okay. And we have said, look, we're not afraid of saying this is a problematic area. Let's put it out there front and centre. We have to improve our performance on this, and here is an indicator that tells us whether or not we're improving.
So the mental health reforms, massive project, $1.9 billion. We asked a Newshub Read research poll this week saying, is the government doing enough to address the mental health crisis? 70% said no. How would you have answered that question?
Well, I know because we're partway through a 5-year program of change. We're probably two and a bit years into it. Yep. We've added over 520 full-time equivalent roles to the front line. We've got now, running 20,000 sessions a month for people for mild to moderate mental health issues, 11,000 people being helped each month. So, and we're starting the long-term work of building that future workforce pipeline. There are a lot of things that are going well. What's not going well is the one thing that we said we committed to a couple of years ago, and that is those mental health facilities for acute patients that desperately need rebuilding or upgrading. We're way behind on that.
And so you're extraordinarily frustrated by that. That's frustrated
by it, and that's why the Minister of Finance and I are working very hard to kind of shake the system to say we've just got to get these things done because it's too important for people.
So who are you shaking? Who are you going out there and shaking? I mean, if you, the Minister Robertson, are going to go and shake somebody, who is it?
It's a whole bunch of agencies. It's Treasury, who sets up this very complicated process for making decisions, the Ministry and others. And
you're saying get on with it.
Saying, well, in fairness, look, people are responding to the system and the rules that they've got. We've got to work on that system and the rules and say we've got to find a better way to accelerate these projects. We know what is needed. We've made the decision. The money is there. We just need to get on and do the work.
Do you think things got a bit fiery at a GP's conference that you attended this week? I mean, you one of the indicators that you talked about was, the under 25 should be able to access mental health within 3 weeks, and then they got laughter from the floor of the conference. I mean, how are you addressing that worker shortfall? I mean, and are they going to believe that you can do it?
Yeah, I think because the GPs, that they are in the front line, and like pretty much the whole of the health workforce who've got us through 2020 and COVID-19, who have been really under the pump. And at a time when many are thinking, gee, look, we've got through the worst of it, actually the health sector is still there. And they're kind of effectively on standby all the time in case there is an outbreak. And added to that, there's been, people have left the health workforce. We've been struggling to replace them. For doctors dealing with, particularly with people with acute mental health issues, they're struggling to get people into the care they need in the hospital. So whereas we've got a target of something like 95% people getting treatment within 3 weeks, we're actually at 65%. So there are people who are waiting a long time. That's what the doctors are seeing and feeling.
And that's right, and they're getting frustrated by that.
And so we need to change. We need to improve that. That's what we're driving to do.
Okay, so just quickly on the workforce. I mean, doctors do want more critical healthcare workers. Look, we've just received an Official Information Act request which shows in the past 12 months 2,700 critical health workers were allowed in, 605 were declined in the last 12 months. These are the people that we need. I mean, that's a refusal rate of 20%. What pressure are you putting on the Immigration Minister to open this up more?
A lot. I mean, of those who, given that our borders are closed and we do have an exemption process for people to come across the borders, non-residents and non-citizens, 43% of those are healthcare workers. But the reality is we have a large number of vacancies and we need more. And I've been talking to the Minister of Immigration too about those who are here already but on short-term visas who are trying to either get them extended or get residency. We need to give them certainty.
So you want those extended?
So working with the Minister of Immigration on that as well.
All right. And just quickly, a couple of quick-fire questions out of that conference. Doctors are also frustrated about poverty and they say it's wider health issues. You're talking about policy work on public health. Are you in favour of a sugar tax?
Look, this is an issue the government has to address on nutrition issues, those things that are driving obesity, those things that are driving...
So are you addressing a sugar tax?
We're not coming to any particular solution at the moment. The work is underway at the moment. We know that we have to deal with those public health issues.
Okay, and just one final comment from the conference. At the end of it, you said you didn't want to be licked up and down by doctors. I mean, I'm trying to understand what that meant. It's
a turn of phrase. Look, people say, "Oh, you weren't kind of, championed or celebrated." You go to these conferences, and particularly at a time when the health sector is under pressure, to hear what the issues are.
So they didn't grease you up, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. That's a turn of phrase.
All right.
It's an old turn of phrase.
OK. Let's move on to another ministerial hat, your spy hat, right? So you're responsible for the GCSB, and you called out China for undertaking state-sponsored malicious cyber activity in New Zealand. Is that a modern-day act of war?
It's become, cyber attacks and cyber offensive activity has become more prevalent. Where we are concerned is when we establish it, where it's state-backed or even if it's done by kind of private organisations within a country's borders and the state turns a blind eye to it, that is a concern to us and we will call that out.
Right, so is that war? Is that cyber war? Are we at cyber war with China, I guess is the question.
To the extent that a state is responsible or is not doing anything about it, it is unacceptable and we will call it out.
OK. What exactly did they target? Was it critical infrastructure? Because if it's critical infrastructure, that is an act of war, is it not?
Well, what they've done is they've exploited, in this case, the Microsoft weakness of Microsoft 365. They exploited the weakness there that has since been patched, and they promoted the availability of that weakness. It's that sort of stuff that, on a state-to-state basis, when we see states either actively doing it or allowing it to happen or promoting it, that is not acceptable and we call that out.
OK. What real repercussions does China face from us? Because we can name-call them along with the rest of the world, but that's it.
China is a rising power and wants to be respected around the world. We, as a small country, we are dependent on a rules-based order for engagement between states. And if China wants to be respected around the world, it has to observe those rules. And
China, of course, is our largest trading partner. Was there any discussion behind cabinet doors about not calling China out because of our dependence on the trade relationship with them?
I think the way we think about our relationship with China is we know, look, they are an important trading partner to us, but equally we need them to observe the same rules that we as a small country observe. That's the way that we protect our interests, but it's actually also the way that we engage maturely with bigger countries.
Okay, and just finally, the attack, the Microsoft hack, do you know what China got out of New Zealand? Do you know the level of information, how concerning it is?
No, I don't. And in the end, what matters most is that once we establish that there is an actor that is either state-backed or state-protected, that's the most important thing from our point of view, to call it out and say this behaviour is not acceptable.
All right, Minister for various ministerial hats, Andrew Lidd, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.